Yeah, hello, Jac. Thank you for coming onto the show.
Thanks for the
So great to have
opportunity.
you here. Yeah, for everyone who is listening to the videos of this channel or the podcast and who may not know you yet, let the viewers know who you are, what you are doing, what brought you to spirituality, maybe, or just what you think could be of interest to someone who first hears of Jac O'Keeffe as a teacher or as a person, however you would like to introduce yourself.
Yes. So I guess each person is multifaceted. So for this interview, what side can I explain best? I'm an Irish woman. I'm in my 50s. I was reared on a dairy farm. And so I have a strong connection with the earth and a strong work ethic. I've always been pretty grounded, even though I tend to jump in and out of other dimensions, and I can see the unseen and I can see other dimensions, chakras, past life. These type of things are also part of my reality, but I don't get distracted by them. Several years of spiritual practice landed me in a substantial shift in how I perceive things. And I teach about this and I guide people towards recognizing how their perception works within themselves. And so that work is how I teach spirituality. And I'm doing that for maybe a dozen years now, maybe more. I've written a few books. I do in-person retreats, have an online community, and see people privately one-to-one at the moment. That's what I do.
Great. That sounds so good. And that also brings me nicely to my first question because what you mentioned that will usually, when we say like a normal person, a normie that comes from like the materialistic paradigm, those things that you just mentioned, some of them will not quite fit into that worldview. And so, how would you start to describe some of your experiences or how you perceive reality as a whole to someone with that worldview?
Yes, good question to begin with. Whatever perception of reality somebody has is right for them. There is no incorrect perception of reality. There are limited perceptions of reality because reality isn't limited. Our perceiving mechanism is where the limitations are. That's the first thing that needs to be understood. When we say, no, like I'm a materialist, or, only what I see is real, the rest of it is just avoidance and people not connected to what is bricks and mortar in front of me. And while that perception is accurate, that perception is a product of how our perceiving mechanism is set up. And many things will contract our perceiving mechanism and limit us to imagining that what's in front of us is the only thing that's real. So what's in front of us is what we perceive. Is it the only thing that's there? Not at all. Not at all. And for many people, that's like, oh, wow, I don't want to perceive more than what's in front of me because fear is what's holding the limitations in place. And so with this work and the path that I walked, it's like, the limitations are in my mind. How can I dissolve those? What would that be like if I dissolved them? And it's dissolving rather than breaking them or violently going after them. It's a dissolving, it's a softening, it's an opening, it's a yielding, which means we've got to deal with fear. We've got to deal with, maybe my control buttons are going to get challenged a little bit. And so as our perception widens, our reality experience completely changes. What we see with our eyes, what we hear with our ears, that's present moment stuff. We have so many other perceiving mechanisms. We have intuition, gut instinct, Some of us have a third eye perception. There are so many other subtle nuances that we haven't scientifically identified yet, but each of us has those capacities. One of those capacities is to recognize you're not your body, you're not your thoughts, you're not who you think you are. Yeah, sure, we all play the role of being an individual person, and we all work on having that being the best version, the most authentic and honest version that works for us, that's aligned with our own value system. But is that really all that you are? Is that the only thing? The role that you play as an individual, is that the only thing really that you are? And so in broadening your viewing point, loosening these limitations on our perceptions, what we discover is that, holy crap, the whole frigging cosmos comes from inside of me. Somebody said that to me recently, and I'm like, yeah. She goes like, but Jac, do you hear me? Do you hear me? And I'm like, yeah. So that becomes very normal. But of course, when you get a spiritual realization, what tends to happen is that you get out of your body and you're like buzzing on it and you want to tell the world, go forth and spread the good news syndrome. It's a syndrome. Be quiet, be still, integrate it, keep it inside. Keep it inside. Not locked away, but let it percolate. How does this spiritual opening impact on how I see the world? How does it impact? Here's another example of that for, an ordinary, regular perception person, if we can kind of say that there is a normal. When somebody close to you dies, or an animal dies, or a parent dies, or heaven bless us, you bury one of your own children. When something huge like that happens, your value system changes, and you're like, I don't sweat the small stuff. I just don't, because life is short. Or, we get a big wallop. Sudden death, grief is a way that hits all of us at some point. And we're like, oh, why the heck could I be bothered by the small stuff? My life has changed. The weeks go by, the months go by. What happens? In comes the limited perception, unless we integrate the change, there's the grief, but here's what I've learned from it. And here is the wisdom that's going to continue with me. And I will let my perception be informed by what I understood, because I got that wallop from grief. You see? And so each of us has these normal experiences that blow out our perception. But then we go right back into the treadmill of our usual MO. And with spiritual work, it's a bit different. We emphasize, all right, normalize it. How does that impact on what you do? This is an inside gig. Don't bleed it out and go talking and go out teaching when you've just had a spiritual experience. Hold on. Let this percolate inside you. What changes are you aware of? What changes can happen as a result of this? And so whatever the experience in life, everything can be used to loosen our perceptions, to challenge us. We can either get more contracted, or we can allow an expansion and allow change to influence us in a positive way. And I think they're the kind of openings that happen in everybody's life, even before they become quote unquote spiritual. Every experience is spiritual. Getting fired from your job can be a spiritual tool. All of these things have an opportunity to make you contract and get more fearful, or to make you see the world from a wider viewpoint. There's an opportunity in everything. And this is what broadens our perception.
Yeah, that's great. And it reminds me of how when you encounter people who just come to the spiritual path, they all have kind of different ideas of what it entails, of the journey that they are getting on, and like concepts like enlightenment or awakening, they are a little bit different in each of everyone's of our minds. And so to have like this general perspective that you just described, where spirituality is about accepting a larger reality step by step and accepting those changes to be a doorway into something larger, into some
Yes.
place where we can find in us a bigger strength. I really
Yes.
I resonate with that.
Yes.
And so when finally I think this opening and this increased awareness brings us to the realization that, as you just said, everything is kind of experienced in us, in consciousness, then the question or the journey really starts, because it's like, what am I then when I'm not this contracted body, but somehow this where everything takes place? And so, how would you become more open to what this spirituality is like? How very practically, how do you tell people how they
Yeah.
approach the path of increased openness, of integrating these insights into aspects of themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. For everybody, it's going to be conscious and as yet unconscious beliefs about how things are. It's it's about really looking to see, did I learn that or is it true? You know what's interesting? It's like, all right, so can you remember how you saw the world like at the age of 4, 5, 6? All right. Before the beliefs locked in, before experiences hardened us, contracted us, there's a taste of that wisdom that we came in with that gets revisited, gets reopened. But we have the wisdom of having lived a life. So we've got some tools, we've got boundaries, we've got a capacity to be, kind, um, and to be competent in the world. So we have these tools, but not the contraction from pain. And so for each of us, everybody has trauma in their system. Like everybody. And different things register as trauma for us. And as a human race, we're not evolved enough yet to shed trauma like many animals do. Like, so animals of prey, like, a mouse isn't a nervous wreck, actually. They're not. Even though they can be swooped down and killed at any moment. And even if they, escape the prowl of a cat and outrun because they go under a rock or something, they stay there. And we think they freeze on the spot, or they're hurt, they're immobilized. No, what they're doing is they're shedding the trauma from their nervous system. We don't do that. We accumulate it. We're not evolved enough yet as a race. A lot of animals have surpassed us here. And while we don't have dinosaurs or anything else who have been seeing us as their food source, seeing us, what we've done is we've not had enough examples of how to evolve our nervous system to where, oh yeah, I'm safe now, it's fine. And what we do instead is we interpret lack of safety in so many places. Resolving what's going on in our nervous system, which gives rise to our conscious and unconscious beliefs, is necessary. It's necessary. We all have to do that. To like, how big is fear playing right now? How big is stress playing right now? How big is anxiety playing right now? These are traumas, trauma responses. There is a good stress called eustress. There is a good stress, which is positive adrenaline that we need in order to deliver. Sometimes, that's fine. But I'm talking about the habitual contraction, which really comes from a learned traumatic response. That's one thing we got to do. I can't quite remember what your question was, Lauritz, but I'm not sure
I
what your
think you
question
already,
was.
yeah, you went into like how to actually what we can do to open up to this larger
Ah,
consciousness, to
mm,
integrate more of what we previously feared and
good.
therefore excluded from our consciousness.
Mm.
So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
is there
yeah,
something like that you can do practically to when the
yeah,
moment arises where you really feel fear and that is holding you back from
yeah.
seeing something or recognizing
Yes,
something, and
yes,
you might get a glimpse and then you say, oh no, I don't want to
yes,
go there.
yes. The most potent first step is to observe what's going on for you. So it's like you're either going to be caught in fear and running the chemicals and in the fearful state, reliving some accumulated trauma that where you've learned what fear looks like, feels like for you, or you can see, okay, there's the rush of chemicals. I can get totally sucked up into that, or I can see it. And that's the first shift in perception that's essential to observe what goes on in our body mind mechanism. That's the essential first move that we all have to make. Can I observe something without comment? Like a security camera, just looking at, doesn't care if it's looking at a trash can or if it's looking at children playing in a schoolyard, it doesn't matter. Be the camera. Be the camera. Now, I don't mean like jump out of your body and dissociate. It's like, I can see what's happening now. Can I be with it? As we get more proficient at observing, we discover that the observer is in the present moment, not caught up in any story at all, has more distance from the belief systems, sees them, doesn't buy into them, doesn't judge them. Hey, hey, let's work more with this observer. The more time you spend on this observer, the more you'll discover, oh, in this present moment, actually, I have an option. I can shut down and go right into the story that my mind and my body, all the chemicals of fear or whatever is running right now, or I can stay here and love my beautiful body and tell it, hey, it's okay. Look, we can breathe deeper. We can do long exhales. We can calm you down. It's okay. You're just having a chemical reaction. It's okay. But for as long as you believe that you're justified in being caught up in fear, if you really believe that that's the best approach, it's going to be very hard to observe what's going on in your body. It's going to be very hard. So the first thing is like, okay, maybe there is another viewpoint within me where I can see what the habit is of my body mind, and maybe I can hang out there a bit more. This is essential. That's the first tool that every single person who walks a spiritual path has to get proficient in. If there's no observing capacity, there's no room for growth. Our humanness doesn't evolve in an ongoing, it's natural cycle of nature where it grows and matures. We become defensive because we don't have a distance from our evolving humanness. We have an absence of compassion for our human selves if we don't have a clean observer developed. Self-love doesn't happen because the criticism is ongoing. There's no criticism. You're learning how, in an observer position, how to see your personality, how to see your quirks and warts and scars and all with love. You see? And so there's no criticism there. And so love, that natural, deeper movement, is there to hold your persona. And then we stop needing love from the outside. Our neediness shuts down. It's like, oh, I don't need it from the outside. Actually, I have a capacity within me to give myself infinite love and care and holding. So the heart begins to open too the more we go into observer and deeper lenses of perception. But the observer is essential, essential.
Yeah, I have found the same, and it resembles my own journey because the first time I got into spirituality was based on just mindfulness meditation. And so that was just the first thing I did to like get
Yes.
into, okay, I can, whatever I experience, there is just this capacity to be not get sucked into the story of what is experienced right now that makes it actually fearful or unpleasant or pleasant, or whatever we fear in that experience is not in the experience itself when you just stay aware, as you just said. So that's
Yes.
very beautiful. And when this capacity has, or the possibility to develop this capacity has been seen in someone, how would they go about actually discovering the wall of fear? And I asked this because I listened to one of your interviews where you mentioned that for a while you were very interested in finding out what is the limit of my personality? Where is the fear actually? Because when you go through your day to day life, as a person, you may not encounter that much fear. And so you said you actually went out into the world and did things that you would never have thought you would do. And so, talk a little bit about this. Would you recommend it, or how about
Yeah.
this kind of testing out what's like beyond current experience?
Yeah. The way my personality works is that I have to experience something and know for myself if it's true or not. I can't talk from theory. Not interested in talking from theory. I either have to have evidence within my own being before I trust it or not. At the same time, I have a lot of courage to jump into the unknown, because how else am I going to break my own limitations? How else? So there's a little bit of risk involved, which I've learned to trust. So going into the unknown, getting out of our comfort zone, that's a fabulous fast forward tool. Fast forward. Because you're either going to stay stuck or you're going to, like, all right, I can stay in the familiar, which is awfully painful and awfully tight, or I can start blasting out these limitations. If I blast them out, it's going to feel uncomfortable. I won't be in control. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. It might be a huge mistake, and it might be wonderful. Okay, I really don't know. Now, if you're okay with all of those things, of like, all right, that's what the unknown looks like, I'm going to do it anyway. Go for it. What's going to happen to you? What's going to happen to you? Your mind will present all kinds of things because it says survival can happen within these limitations. I can't guarantee your survival outside of these rules. I can't guarantee it. It's like, okay, mind, but you know what? You're just a tool for managing in the world. Maybe there's more to me than what my mind says. Just maybe. Let's take a chance and find out. Be like a kid and explore fearlessly. And so, what takes you out of your comfort zone? What takes you out of your comfort zone? Is it as simply as walking out the door with no makeup on? That could be a serious challenge for somebody. Is it wearing clothes that are really clothes that you would like laugh at somebody else for wearing? What is it? Is it like, okay, I would never finish the sentence. I would never, or I wouldn't be seen dead doing, what's the sentence? I mean, a classic one that I like to say to people is like, put some underwear on your head and go to the grocery store. With complete and total seriousness, as if this is a normal attire. You might have a mask on your face these days. Put underwear on your head. And just see what's my mind going to do. Now stay an observer, right? So if you're in your trauma, your fear-based position, it could be like, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. It's like, all right, so can we go into the observer and say, all right, I hear you, mind. You think that's absolutely beyond your capability. I hear you. And that thought is fine. The observer says, sure, anything. I mean, this is unlimited. No, this is unlimited. Why couldn't we do that? Why not? What's going to happen? You're not going to get arrested for it. What's going to happen? So let's go into what happens, because your personality thinks, I will die. I wouldn't be seen dead doing something. I would never do this because I will die. So here's our fear of death, no? It's the strongest fear. And so, all right, let's test it. Let's test it. Let's see if I will die if I put underwear on my head and go to the supermarket. Let's see. Go through the experience. You won't die at all. You'll actually have a total laugh at people's, okay, I'm just going to be completely oblivious. I have no idea what people are laughing at, and let the role be played and let people respond the way they do, and completely nonchalantly do your shopping. Get back home, take off your underwear, and celebrate because you didn't die. You didn't die. And so much of our fears are based on ideas from past traumas, because this is the way you got to behave because you're going to die. And it's like, actually, it's not true. It's not true. Let's test them. Make a list of the top 10 of, I would never do that. Get out of your comfort zone and notice, my gosh, my mind thinks it would kill me. It really does. Because, that's what the mind does. I will help you to survive. And your survival is always under threat. You see, we're back there again to like our unevolved humanness. And I suppose part of my work is like, hey, let's catch up. Let's play catch up as a race. Let's play catch up with where the animals are teaching us something, how to shed and how to discern, when am I in danger and when am I not in danger here? You see, because these are the unnecessary limitations. These are the things that stop us from living a free life, free from the dictates of fear, free so that whatever moves inside you is honored by your body mind mechanism, and that fear is not controlling you at all. And then fear goes into a place of like, sure, if a window breaks and I'm in bed in the middle of the night, sure, I'm going to feel fear. Sure, I am. Because, because possibility is I'm under threat here. Fear will crank up then. I'm totally fine with that. I have no interest in fear where it doesn't belong, where it doesn't have to do with survival. I have no interest in it at all. My goodness, what a waste of energy. And we can all live like this, no?
Yeah. I like the practicality of your advice. Like, it's not only about spiritual, like traditional meditation and trying to understand it from just watching it with closed eyes sitting somewhere. It's
Yes.
actually seeing how is all of this spiritual knowledge very practical in my
Yes.
day life, influencing how
Yes.
I experience reality.
Yes.
And so the
Yes.
fear is, it's not about the specific fear that you are tackling with, like, for example, as you said, going to the supermarket with underwear. You might get comfortable doing that, but through the spiritual process, you actually, while you watch your own mind mindfully, while you do that, you get free of the whole liability to fear. And that is
Yes.
really where this can take you. And so, whether you choose to do that, or maybe your fear is a particular other one, there is a generality here. And so, yeah, it's a great spiritual practice to look for what you
Yes.
are fearful of and transcending that.
Yes. And challenge it. Look
Yeah,
that limitation in your mind and say, okay, actually, my logical brain says I won't die doing this, but my
yeah,
belief system says I will. That's wonderful if somebody has that capacity to see, my belief system believes this, but actually logic and my wisdom of life says that mightn't be true. Now, what are we going to do about that? You got to prove it wrong. You got to actually do the thing so that your mind has evidence that, that wasn't a fear after all. I'm not scared of it anymore. That's the only way I know how to do it. It's like, otherwise it's intellectual, It's like, let's get practical. Let's really get practical here, you know?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And how would you describe the experiential or even emotional quality of, once you have went through that process and then are free of
Mm.
your liability of fear or anxiety or anger, or any other thing that like got you really into this negative spiral beforehand? What would you describe as that freedom like?
Yeah, I'm reluctant to say that fear or anxiety, that those emotions would never again show up. Because as soon as we say, okay, I've transcended fear, it'll never again show up, it will come. There's something about that kind of shutting down an experience which actually is a symptom of we're not finished. So the openness that comes from freedom will allow more layers of being caught in some story of our mind to show up at any time. The openness even extends to that, to fallibility, to blind spots in our humanness. You see? So there's, I suppose, this myth out there that, oh yeah, so those things never happen again. It would be great to know that I'd never again have, fear and anxiety dominating my life, and my life would feel totally free. The freedom is not from something, it's freedom itself. There is freedom in welcoming anxiety if it wants to play a part in my life again. Or, well, actually, I was never somebody who was anxious, but, or fear, if fear wanted to play a part in my life again, I wouldn't, like, the freedom is undisturbed. So, of course, it could show up. Of course, old hidden traumas can show up. The freedom isn't rocked by any of that. That's what the experience is. It's not that I'm immune from it, but they are experienced in a different way. This stillness, this recognition of, I suppose, capital R reality, as we call it, the recognition of that has space for every human experience to show up. The human experiences that show up, they pass through, they're not very sticky. One thing that is a really useful tool is to be able to notice when our response is disproportionate to what happened, to the stimulus. That's an interesting thing to keep an eye out for. It's like, so-and-so said something, but my response is disproportionate. To own that, it's like, all right, if your response is disproportionate, the term we often use is, I got triggered. Something got scratched, which wasn't actually to do with the event or the exchange, but whoa, it has opened something deeper. All right, own it. Don't project it back on the other person and be disproportionately, caught in yet another layer of embedding that original scar in your system. Instead, I had a disproportionate response there. That was a bit over the top. Okay, what's that teaching me about myself? Where is the limitation there? Where did I get caught up in something disproportionately, and why? And why? So what is it that needs some attention and love within me? What have I not seen yet that could only come up in that way? What else can I find out about that? It's not about the other person. We end up being grateful for people who scratch us. We end up having gratitude for anybody who triggers a disproportionate response, because they're opening Pandora's box to some part of our personality that we didn't see before. And so that ongoing work needs to happen. And there are some tools of, freedom itself is here, yet there are tools for remaining open, for how my humanness is also involved in this open freedom of its own evolution, nestled in care and love. You see? And this is what will help evolve our human race, you know? And thankfully, there's an awful lot of talk about trauma now. We're beginning to like, okay, oh, thankfully, we're beginning to be onto it, you know? And maybe in another 100 years, we will have changed our wiring a little bit to not be so subject to a survival threat when actually it's not a survival threat at all. It's just somebody projecting their pain onto you. That's got nothing to do with your survival as a human species. You see? And let's work towards the recognition of freedom itself so that we're not free from it, but that life can happen, but it's held within a wider capacity of what we know to be more authentically who we are.
Yeah, I would agree. There is this interesting aspect, I think, of our evolution that we still carry with us, even though it doesn't apply at all anymore to our
Yes,
environment.
that's right.
And we are reacting, most of the cases that we encounter, we are reacting because of that, which is not yet, which we doesn't, which we have not yet discovered. And
Yes, yes,
so it
yes.
definitely comes somewhere out of our past. Um, and one of these things you also touched upon is our idea of who we are in like these social situations when we get triggered by something or someone, something someone said to us. And how how is the spiritual progress or the whole path in your experience changing how you relate to other people?
Mm, mm. Good boundaries are necessary. And I was reared in a family where there were 6 children. There ain't no boundaries with 6 children. Like, there's just no boundaries, like there isn't. My husband is an only child, and his boundaries are like airtight, you know? So he had to soften his, and I had to learn how to find mine. Learning about, what's involved in having healthy boundaries is a skill that we all need to learn. We all need to learn. That's not in our common code of social skills as yet. Anything goes, you know, especially with social media. It's like there seems to be no limit at all of what's okay and what's not okay and what's respectful and what's disrespectful. It's like a vomit anything anywhere. And that's where we're at right now, and it will find its balance. It's not wrong, it's where we're at. And it will come back when we'll discover that actually, maybe that's my stuff, because we're not yet trained to know what's mine, where's the boundary, what's yours. We don't have good boundaries as yet. And so, I've just forgotten, Laura, it's your question again. I tend to do that sometimes.
No, that's what you
Sorry.
answered was actually related to that.
Ah,
How the how spiritual insights or development in a person, how that changes how they relate to other people, how they maybe
yes.
even view other people. And I come to this question from what have many people asked me is I have this insight that other people are not really real in the same sense as I have discovered I'm not real.
Mm,
I'm not the real person I thought I was before. And so
mm,
other people are lacking the same reality. And so is that changing how one relates to other people and
mm.
how does that play out practically?
Yeah, great. There is an interim phase on the journey. And it the interim phase is typical of the spirituality that has happened in ashrams, in monasteries, in protected environments. And now, with the internet, teachings are available everywhere, and it's up to the students to kind of like figure out, everybody who's on a path. Yeah, I jive with that person. No, I don't jive with that person. And find out where can a teacher's message resonate with them. We're moving towards more autonomy, where everybody who is seeking learns more skills around that works for me, that doesn't make sense. Rather than that teacher's full of crap, maybe they're just not right for me right now. Maybe they're just not right. Because very often a teacher might be scratching your ego. And then you're going to get teachers who are absolutely abusing their power. And maybe that's why you don't like the teacher. It's kind of the Wild West out there. Because we're moving from a monastic, enclosed, protected environment of where spiritual awakening happened to you got to navigate this yourself. It's not friggin' easy. It's not easy, but we're ready for it at another level. We're ready for it. And so because we're of this time of where we're learning how to navigate ourselves, embodiment is something that's going to have to be more spoken about and better understood. Because embodiment is when your spiritual insights are useful in your daily life, in how you relate to people. And very often embodiment didn't need to happen in these monastic enclosed environments because family was pulled away from them. The choice of what to wear was taken away because you wore the robes of the collective, you maybe didn't have to cook for yourself because you were in this, the closed spiritual community takes care. And there's something very, very ungrounded and disembodied about that. Disembodied. How awakening shows up in your life, man, that's tricky. So we've got this middle stage of where the insights happen. And these insights, how the heck, I know none of this is real, but how the heck am I going to go to work tomorrow when I know none of it is real? How can I take it seriously? How can I function? Now, the idea of it being a fearful state is quite different to what's really going on because the idea of it is disembodied. Come right back into the present moment. The present moment. Now, the embodied state means including your body because the shifts are in our perception. Even if we go the Tantra path, and Tantra is a spiritual tradition, an ancient spiritual tradition, as old as Buddhism. It's linked to Buddhism, and it has an emphasis on awakening through the body, the experiences of the body. It's still about a shift in perception. It still engages in how you see yourself and using the body, the experiences of the body to drop into spacious awareness, stillness, to drop into that which is not of the mind and to drop again into emptiness itself. There is no avoiding these shifts in perception. Pulling them into your body, that's a piece of work. That's a piece of work. How do we do it? We've got to clear out the limitations that are in our biology. See, the limitations, the belief system that we started talking about earlier, and I know I kept putting my hands here like blinkers on a horse, to stop them from, an excitable horse has blinkers on the side so that they don't get shocked by peripheral vision, to dull down their nervous system. That's why we put blinkers on a horse, dull down their nervous system so that they're not distracted by the sideshow. And it's the same for us. Our limitations dull down, increase our chances of survival, basically. Dumb down our perception. All right, so these limitations start to break and we get an insight and we go, oh my good Lord, things are not the way I thought they were at all. And we're getting a glimpse, as we call it. You've used the word a few times, which is great. It's like something opens. There's a crack There's a crack in your limited perception and some light is coming in and you're like, oh, holy Moses, I'm looking from a different place. This is not what I thought it was. I'm not who I thought it was. All right. Bring it into your body. Bring it into your body. Otherwise, you're going to be disconnected from your neck down. And your mind is going to scramble to make sense of this. And all the other pieces of how you built yourself up will be shoved down into your body and you will be disconnected. You'll have a disembodied and ungrounded awakening. So spend some time. How's it feel in my body? No, my body feels the same. All right, let's go down there. And if that means leaving the glimpse, all right, go back into your body. Bring the light into your body. Bring the clarity into your body. Now, here's the danger. Spiritual bypassing will come in. But my body couldn't be real. If I'm not real, my body couldn't be real. Now we're using logic instead of an insight. What we're looking for is like, what's really the truth of this situation? Can I understand this from a wider perspective? What is the role and function of my body? Is my body full of light? What's going on here? Am I my body? Or is it my body? Is it a glove that I wear and I am I am some source of animation and it's like a glove on my hand? Is my body that? All right, so how can I take care of this? What would be a less excitable, because the mind will run off on a spiritual glimpse, which is going in the opposite direction to where it needs to go. If I settle with this and like go into my sleeping bag and zip it up and go, all right, this needs to drop in. This needs to drop in. Take time with it. Can I let this drop in? But the more we go and chat to friends, we're spitting it out again. What's happening is the insight comes in through our crown chakra. And by the time it hits our throat, we go, whoops, let's bleed it out, bleed it out, bleed it out, bleed it out. And we never drop it down into where embodiment really begins, which is the heart. We got to get it into our torso. That's the phase of embodiment that didn't need to be addressed in closed communities and protected environments where spirituality was housed. Now we got to do this while our kid is waking up at 3:00 in the morning, vomiting in their bed. Now, when you're facing and you're waking up with that, it's like, okay, what am I going to do? Say, oh, my kid isn't real. Like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to bring the awareness and say, okay, there is one dimension where this is absolutely real. And I know there are others. And so begin to let yourself expand to recognizing that each lens of perception presents a certain version of the movie of the world. And so the me, myself, I movie, okay, I can dismiss it and say it's not real and flick it away, but I'm going to be a jerk and I will never have an embodied awakening if that's what's going to happen, because I'm going to keep it in my head in order to deny responsibility. It's about and there's a capacity for my humanness, and there's a capacity for a wider sense of freedom. There's a capacity for emotions to run through my body, and there is a part of me that's unperturbed by whatever emotion is allowed to pass through, because really freedom is untouched. It's like, for me, there are many lenses of perception. I'm not stuck to any of them. They kind of slide in and out. They just slide in and out according to life itself. And I never move from where I'm looking from. And let's say the Jac story is playing, or like, the Jac story has to, I don't know, like here she is talking to Lauritz. All right, so the Jac woman is doing an interview right now. And the Jac woman is held within what I am. And there is a deeper capacity that doesn't have identification with that either. that has no identification at all. That the idea of being anything, of having any essence. It's like, yeah, okay, actually, that's a lens of perception too. Deeper than that, okay, that any word I use is not going to be exactly the right one because language can't go there. Yep. So emptiness outside of all of it has no problem in honoring the lens of perception of this Jac woman doing an interview right now. Of course, of course. It's like she will be honored and laureates will be honored, and doing our best to interpret how this can help others will be honored, and they're the value systems that are running right now. They're the value systems. That's what's motivating this movement of this precise moment. Nothing else really. I take care of this body because I have a cup of coffee here because it's 8:30 in the morning, and I've got a glass of water here, and I'm taking care. There's care. It, the heart opening part ensures that there is care taken and respect and honoring of every lens of perception. And each lens of perception is a different viewpoint of how the world works. I have access to seeing that this is a hologram right now. And there is access to knowing that, there is no solid forms at all, that these are waves. I can literally turn on a viewing point and see that these are waves and there is no 3D at all in this dimension. And like, all these lenses of perception are available. Like, I'm not stuck to any of them. None of them are actually the truth. None of them. I can play in all of them as is required. But none of them can give me anything, really. I don't want anything. Truth is deeper than all of this.
I
But the
like how
attitude
that,
of,
yeah, how that what you just said ties in with something you mentioned at the very beginning, how even the person who has only the lens of materialism, how that is actually real in a sense. It
yes,
is
yes,
because from this
yes,
point of view of emptiness, as you just said, there's only pure acceptance of all of these different kinds of lenses that are the necessary step through which reality becomes real.
yes,
And so it's not
yes,
about when you see, oh, this lens isn't absolute reality as I thought it was before.
yes,
It's not the conclusion to say, oh, now I'm denying all of that and say it is absolutely not real is one step too far, in my opinion. And
yes,
so when we see every perspective for what it is, for being the mechanism of how reality becomes quote unquote real, then we are also again free to like pour all our love, acceptance, and energy into what it is that we experience.
yes,
And
yes,
yeah,
yes,
that's kind of my thoughts that just
yes,
arose in me while I was listening to what you were
yes,
just
yeah,
explaining.
yeah. And, while a teacher might say it's absolutely not real, it might be useful to blow out a limitation of what we think reality is. But to live with that attitude, it's not real, is disembodied. The embodied state says it's real and it's not real at the same time. And there is no paradox there. There's actually no contradiction there. It's like, yeah, it's real and it's not real. Because both of those lenses of perception are showing up in front of me right now. So sure, it's real within its own realm of happening. It is real, and in the wider view, it's not real, and both are fine. The dual and the non-dual are both viewed from a wider view.
Yeah, that's actually from the viewpoint of complete emptiness. Because it
That's right.
itself, as the word
That's right.
emptiness implies, cannot have any qualities to it. And so the way it becomes real is only through this imaginary.
Yes,
experience.
yes. And
And
it's imagining itself. You know,
yes,
emptiness isn't imagining it, it's imagining itself from within itself. This
yes,
matrix, as I often call it, it's a matrix, you know.
yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah,
where
it's
reality just falls, there where words just fall short, right? It's you have to use a word to describe this ultimate reality, but it also at the same time doesn't exist as something separate from right here, right now.
Mhm,
It is this
mhm.
as well at the same time, and it is manifesting all of that. Yeah, um, that's so beautiful. Um, and you kind of implied already something underneath what you just explained, and I have heard you talk about some of those in other videos. What are some frameworks or series or maybe even analogies that you like to use in order to explain to someone what this whole process is like? Do you have like a series that you use, or have you developed one, or do you use series of someone else?
Yeah, my path was kind of unusual, and I realize now that it was to prepare me to teach because I had to have a load of experiences. And you know, Lawrence, I knew this as a child. I remember I was 6 or 7. I was young, and I remember being really worried that I was white. Really worried. I'm like, but I can't have the experience that I'm a person of color. Oh my God, it's an experience I can't have. Oh my God, what am I going to do? There's an experience I won't be able to have. I remember that thought, and I worried and I worried and I worried. And I knew it was just, there was no point in saying this to anybody because it would just be dismissed. Because when I spoke about those kind of things, they're like, shut up, Jac. You know, that's what I'd get. So, so yeah, like knowing that, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? No idea at all, of course, that like so many years later, what was going on was an accumulation of experiences need to be had so that I would have the capacity to 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 access somebody else's experience in the best way that I can. You can never fully, but that I could kind of find the frequency of somebody else's experience in order to kind of pull them out of there, grab them by the hand and pull them out. And sometimes it feels like that. It's like, come on, I gotcha, I see what. And sometimes people are like, not ready, too much, can't do it. And that's my opportunity for growth. It's like, okay, Jac, you misread that they were ready for it. Because very often people say, I'm tired of this, I want more. But actually, they don't. They're not finished with the experience, whatever gifts the experience of being stuck has for them. Let that be honored. If that needs to be honored, that needs to be honored. There is a timing thing involved here, too. And so at a certain point, it's like, are you really done with this experience of pain? Are you really done with this experience of anxiety? Have you chewed every single thing that it can give you? Is it done? Do you feel like, yeah, there's an internal exhaustion from it. I am so done. It's like, okay, if that's authentic, then of course the light will come in because you're walking out of it. You just don't know where you're going yet. And help will work because you're already cranked up to move to the next experience. But if you're still getting juice out of a stuckness, nothing will help you. No, nothing, because like be with what your experience is. Maximize every insight, every facet of the experience you're having. Be with it. Be fully in it. Be fully in it. You know?
And in that regard, how would you then describe if someone who's maybe not even spiritual or has not heard of these things, they get permanently stuck somewhere because then when they don't actually actively look for a place to grow into or out of, rather, um, how is it that they can permanently get stuck? Because But what I take from what you said, you at a certain point you don't get anything anymore out of where you
Mm.
are. And so is that a natural development that people then find they have to grow and maybe find spirituality, or are there also other ways in which this inner drive to like grow gets expressed?
The belief that there is permanence is what will keep somebody stuck in that experience. It's subtle, huh? It's not the experience itself, it's the belief this will never change. I've tried everything, nothing helps. God has forgotten me. It's hopeless. I'm hopeless. I'll never aspire to anything. This is my lot. I deserve this. That's the belief system that creates the idea of permanence. None of it is true. None of it is true. There is nothing permanent. Nothing. Nothing, nothing, nothing is permanent within all of these lenses of perception. They all change and move all the time, constantly unfolding, constantly changing. And so if somebody listening to this feels that they are stuck in something, the belief that you're stuck, sometimes it's not about what has you stuck, it's the belief systems that are around it. So then I would look at self-worth. I would look at, really, you think that you deserve this? Really? Okay. The God has forgotten about you. So let's look at the pattern of being a victim. Where else has victim shown up for you? Do you run a self-pity party? That might sound really harsh if somebody's in the throes of the experience, but at some point we got to see that, oh my God, I do get off on self-pity. And when we can see that, oh my God, the freedom that comes from throwing off being a victim, oh my God, it's wonderful. But when you're in the throes of the experience, that's awfully hard, because being a victim is fueled by the need. The only way I get my need for attention filled is by being a victim. And the need for love is so great because that person wouldn't have had their needs met effectively when they were very young. That's where that would have started. And so that they had to find a way of earning attention and love. Now, then being a victim is tied to your survival. You see, it'll all go back to like, if I can throw off being a victim, I will die. I don't know how to communicate with people. I will lose my friends. How am I going to get attention? It's like, yeah. That's really about your needs were not met. You weren't loved for being you. You didn't get enough attention just for being you. And you had to morph yourself into something, into a behavior to get attention. And so that's where I would go. There are a few steps there, but if somebody feels permanently stuck, it's got to do with very early on basic needs were not met sufficiently. That's not putting blame on a parent. That's like, hey, you got to see that this is part of your wiring. You've had that experience of not having your needs met. All right, great. Let's work with that experience. That's going to give you wisdom. Like every experience that I've ever had, somewhere I know that it helps me to help others. I know it. I've seen it too often for it to happen. And so it's like, okay, oh, look at this other pocket of pain. All right, or this experience, you know? Like something I saw recently. It was after an acupuncture session. And 2 days after the acupuncture session, this insight came in the middle of the night. I was like, oh my God, nobody is minding me. The sentence, nobody is minding me. I went, okay, that was pre-verbal and I've just put a concept on it. Nobody was minding me. Nobody's minding me. Who's minding me? And I went, oh, this is wonderful. Okay, baby Jac, come on, play with this. Let it all come. Let it all come. Somewhere there was a little piece of chi that was blocked. My biology had this memory. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything at all about it. But the acupuncturist unblocked something, which was this memory. Woke up in the middle of the night. 2 days later, I was like, Nobody's, oh my God, as a little kid, somehow I put it into my biology and now I'm turning it into a concept. So it was a pre verbal experience. You know, if you've got five older sisters, of course, you're minding Jack, you're minding this one, and they get mixed up and they forget and they go off playing because it's an Irish family, you know, an Irish set of sextuplets, like steps of a stairs. So of course there's confusion. Of course, somehow like whoever was minding the baby forgot to mind the baby. I get it. But what I did with that experience, it's like, oh my God, nobody's minding me. Oh wow. Okay, how does that play up? How does that play out? And it was really interesting. I love discovering little early traumas or big later traumas, but they don't come up that often in the last 15 years. You know, it's like being constantly open to pre-verbal as well as verbal stuff that's in our memory, stuff that's locked in our body. It's beautiful to like reclaim these frozen pieces that are locked in time. It's a beautiful thing. There's no threat in any of this. It's about our sense of love and honor being allowed to express even more deeply for our humanness. And this enables us then to serve others because we have to drink as we pour, you know? Like we have to take care of ourselves. And if we're managing our own needs, we can better serve, we can better manage otherwise. Otherwise, it's all kind of mixed up and we're giving with an agenda, you see? And
Yeah, so you say basically, if I can kind of say it in my own words, we have all these little seeds in our psyche that are stored there from past experience, and they get activated once
yes,
we experience something in our actual present experience that triggers them. And so it's difficult to be aware of all of those little stored memories and seeds, but very subtly they influence our
they
experiences.
they do. They
Yeah.
do. It's
And
very
so
subtle.
the work is about like becoming mindful and then actually seeing how they play out in daily experience. It's not about this mindfulness where, oh yeah, I'm just aware of my body for its own sake, or of the air I'm breathing, or the
That's
sounds
where
I'm
it
hearing.
starts, though. That's where it
That's where
starts,
it
isn't it?
starts,
Because
right?
that's being present.
Right. But then it's used to actually discern, like, okay, what can
Wonderful.
I see in this presence? How is like everything arising out of this nothingness, and how is it
Yes,
filtered through my lens,
yes,
and where is it
yes,
serving me and where is it not? So yeah, that's
yes,
beautiful.
yes. And the perfection of our humanity is because it's imperfect. It can only be imperfect. You know, we have this mad idea of like perfection. That's the perfect tree. Really? That's a perfect tree? That's a perfect apple? Really? According to what standards? What value systems? Like bonkers, no? Nature doesn't do that type of perfection. It doesn't. It's just not a currency here. And so let's align a little bit more with nature. You know, the perfection is because we're imperfect and we can constantly grow and learn and change and evolve and hold ourselves in love. Hold ourselves in love because with a loving relationship for our human part means that we can embody as we go because the deeper heart is open. The energy of love is what weaves through every lens of perception.
Mhm.
Authentic love. And it's got to start with ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
You know?
And
But
I feel also the more of these fear-based conditionings we dissolve, the more we actually allow reality to flower through us.
that's it.
And yeah,
Beautiful.
this all goes back to the idea of freeing the present moment from the weight of the past, because the past is really only ever created now. So however we create and weigh down the present moment with our idea of what we experienced in the past is really how it's created and how it influences what we do now. And so this whole work is about cleansing your lens of perception of these wrong
Yes.
ideas of how things should
Yes.
be, of how you should be, of how you
Yes.
should feel even, or how
Yes.
you whatever. And so yeah,
Yes.
that's the whole
Yes.
process is really a very personal, and I really love your perspective to say there are certain traditions which have a lot of value, but sometimes they are not really that practical, and we have to find a way for like the 21st century where
That's
people
right.
can actually
That's
do
right.
that while caring for a family or
Yes.
doing other things in their lives.
Yes.
And so
Exactly.
that's beautiful,
That's right.
very
That's right.
practical approach, I
Yeah.
think.
And I think the importance of, there really isn't a destination. There are
Yeah,
plateaus along the way, where another lens of perception might be opened up, and it might go forwards. It might look like you're going backwards. You actually can't go backwards, but it might feel like it because that's an experience that needs to be had. But actually, you can't go backwards. You actually can't. It's just another layer of stuff that has shown up for your growth, for to bring into the light, and so, like, finally getting there, that's a myth. There is no finally getting there, because the ongoing openness is a characteristic of freedom itself. So, change is inevitable, impermanence is inevitable, and so everything experienceable is going to continue to be experienced, you know and so, well, how can there be a getting there, a finality? There isn't. There are different points, but it's ongoing,
yeah. And I find that there is a kind of awakening, but from that point onwards, when you have seen that which you really are can never be hurt by anything, and that
That's right.
also at the same time nothing really matters to it,
Yes.
that's when you have like the deep knowledge of this freedom, and then you can say, okay, with that knowledge of my true self, I now go out into this world through this human body, and I try to embody more of that. And that is a
Yes.
really, as you just said, it's
Yes.
this process never ends, and
Yes.
where also
And
the work really just starts.
yes, indeed. And to cultivate humility, because how do I go out into the world with this lens of perception? And what the mind will do? Oh, I'm more awake than they are. Oh, it will project, 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 project. That's what it'll do. Whereas, you know, the humble heart allows, okay, that's what my perception is deciding is going on with their perception, when frankly I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue of where they're looking from right now. But I want to imagine that I'm superior. Income separation all over again. Unless we've gone from the head down to the heart, unless there's some humility about our perspective, absolutely the mind will start creating, I'm better than. And it's okay, now it's just going to start to close it in, or you're going to turn into a jerk. It's going to start closing it in now. You know,
Yeah,
Tricky, huh?
this is something that can actually be a trap on this
Yeah.
spiritual path.
Yeah.
Once you like get some deep insights, you cling to them as if
Yes.
they were truer in some sense. Then in a certain way they are truer, but in another sense they are all just part of your story again.
Yes.
And and
Yes, you're
to
rebuilding another story, another version of it, a
right,
better version.
yeah, the
I've
spiritual
got something
ego.
that you don't have. I can help you. And it's like, there's the spiritual ego. Thank you. There's the term. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So humility got, spend a bit of time exploring what humility is. Not victim, but authentic humility. You know,
Hmm.
that's a good one.
Yeah. And in that regard, where do you feel comes true motivation from once you have discovered the relativity of all perspectives and you have let go of your ego based motivational system, which was running the show beforehand? How do
Sure, it
you
was.
find like truer motivation or sense of purpose, even?
Yeah. I did things like, all right, so if I completely put the jack brain out of the way, will this body move? Will it do anything? Let's see. So I spent a long time of like, all right, let's see what happens. Oh, my body gets up, goes for a pee, goes back to bed again. It's going to go for food now. All right. I'm not doing anything. I'm absolutely not going to do anything. Let's see what it does. So my body kind of took care of itself. It was a really interesting exercise to find out how much of my day is directed by, oh, I'd like to do that now. Oh, I should do that now. Like how much it is just random pulling thoughts and motivating me. It cleared the decks. It cleared the decks. And I got to taste the difference of when an inner sense was moving and when the mind came up with a nice distraction of an idea. It became very clear, the sound of the two inputs. The inner movement is, I do my best. Can I say it's always like that? Of course I can't. I mean, how could I? So I do my best to allow an inner movement to direct my way on. For that shift to happen, my brain and my body had to bow down to that which is deeper. The humility had to come into my mind and into my body to like, this is where service happens. That my mind is in service to that which has a deeper wisdom, which my mind can't go there, but it can serve. And so this movement picks up my body, picks up my brain, and whatever happens is that's the best I can do given what I know at this time. And I stand over that. And I must be responsible for that at every level. Every lens of perception is responsible, rather than, oh no, that came from the non-Jew place. I'm not responsible at all. There's no personal I. That's vomit. It's vomit, So it's like an alignment happens because emptiness is, here we go again, every word is going to like change where I'm trying to point to. And then, this capacity to hop in and out of different lenses of perception. At the end of the trajectory of what I am is the Jac woman, the densest part, the beautiful human. And so that bows down to what I am. And as a result, because of the body mind is in service to what I am, so is every other lens of perception. There is the sense of alignment and embodiment and the wholeness of the whole cosmic play and how it narrows down to this woman, that's how it rolls out here from when her story wakes up in the morning, from deep sleep.
Would you say
But
this kind of movement from like this most inner place is happening for everyone and is just held back by the ego lens or the ego filter? And actually
it's
by
more,
removing that, you uncover that, or is it something you have to develop?
it's happening all the time. However, it gets deviated, it gets rerouted. So let's say it is pure light, energy. Let's say it's life force. All right. So any of these words work. And then it's like, oh, but it should look like this. Goes over here. Oh, but I have to do this. Oh, I need that person to like me, so I'm going to do this. Oh, that's my habitual feeling of guilt and shame. So that'll make me do this. It's like, okay, now we're doing that. It's become something entirely different. How it shows up is entirely different, but the underpinning energy is as pure as it is for anybody. But it's got these overlays of thoughts and ideas and beliefs and survival mechanisms and experiences and history and projections into the future, you see? And it's modified it, completely modified it. And it now it just does something else in the world. It's being creative in the world. It's just creating more experiences of pain. and experiences of subjective joy. And there's so much more.
Yeah. And I find also, at least for me and some other people I've talked about, talked to about this, is you are actually actively doing this and then denying the fact that you deviated in certain directions, this energy that you may not like. And so it's not about stopping to do that, but it's about recognizing at first
Yes,
how you do
yes,
that,
that's
or
right.
at all that you are doing
That's
that.
right.
And with
That's right.
increased clarity and
Yes,
self-perception, mindfulness,
that's
it
right.
is actually possible to see how that from this pure inner light or stillness or consciousness,
Yes,
you actually this is created, this
yes,
whatever feels unwholesome to you.
that's right. That's right. So if we bring that back to an example that we spoke about earlier, somebody says something or does something, and your reaction is disproportionate, and you know it is. Now, the the aligned response is there, but the overlay of what you think they said and your own triggers turn it into a reaction, which is disproportionate. And when you see what happened for you and how you got triggered, the natural response is there. It's there. It's there. It's beautiful. You know? Sometimes we have to learn social skills because, like, how does that natural response show up in the body? We have cultural nuances. We have, it's like I lived in Ireland and a few other countries, but I live in the US now, and how I culturally behave in the two countries is quite different. You when you're in Rome, you do as the Romans do, as they say. And so my personality had to, like, okay, my personality, like the glove on the hand, on the source of animation. It's like my personality had to modify. There's no trauma in that, but it's like modifying what's culturally appropriate out of respect for, you're a newcomer, so you gotta kind of, you just do morph into the culture out of respect for it. You see, so there's those social skills sometimes need to be learned. Sometimes it's like, okay, if I pull back all of my emotional reactivity and me making a mountain out of a molehill because that person, actually what they said was harmless, but I made it huge, maybe I haven't a clue how to respond. Actually, I don't know at all how to respond. It's like, all right, now you might need some social skills. Now there actually might be, no example in your childhood of a parent who had the skill of an appropriate response in that situation, because you've only seen emotional reactivity. You've never seen an emotional response. And sometimes we have to, like, learn things and, read books like this one, nonviolent communication, for example. It just happens to be on my desk. It's like there are these tools that we need to learn to finish off our humanness, and that's part of our evolution and ongoing growth. Until we rear our children with these tools, then we're not really changing anything.
Yeah, so it's both at the same time if we complete the spiritual progress. It is about deconstructing the false beliefs through the tools of spirituality with meditation or mindfulness, but then at the same time seeing, okay, if all that remains is my wholesome conditioning, where is this conditioning maybe lacking something? And that is where
That's
like
right.
personal development basically has to fill
Yes.
in the gaps.
Yes. You
Yeah,
might have to learn and study about boundaries. You might have to learn some social skills. Great, go for it.
yeah,
That'll
that's not to
equip
be
you
neglected.
better. No, no, it's not to be neglected at all. It's an important part of spiritual maturation.
Yeah, yeah. I find that as well, and that's also why I gave this channel the name Conscious Development. It is about not only seeing what consciousness is, but also about developing yourself as a person. And
That's right. There's the
because
embodiment part. Yeah, that
yes,
helps the embodiment part. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes you can take it a little bit too far by deconstructing everything that you believed about reality or what you think is good to have, and if you then are left with nothing that is part of your personality, then there's also no real depth to life. You know, it's harder to engage with reality when there is nothing you stand on. You know, when
Yes.
everything just falls into this relativity of meaninglessness, or maybe some
Yes.
people even get into this nihilistic or solipsistic
Yes.
conditioning. And that's really something where you can see then, okay, there is still some limitation to what I perceive. There is still
Yes.
something that holds me
Yes.
back from actually
Yes.
seeing the truth of reality, because I'm
Yes.
standing somewhere if I resist something,
Yes.
even if that something that I resist is the development of my personality,
Yes.
which wants to express itself. Maybe, I don't
Yes.
know, but for most people, it probably will.
And I suppose I'd like to highlight there is still something. It's like there will always be something. It's
Hmm.
not going to ever be a job done. It's not. It's
It
not.
cannot,
There will
yeah.
always be something. And
Yes,
for
it
us
cannot,
to like,
because that would, yeah, that would say that
yeah,
something is permanent.
yeah, the mind will only say, yes, exactly. The mind will say, oh, I've got more work to do and it'll be better when I get there. That's the mind. Those perceptions are, invalid outside of the mind's interpretation of what spirituality is about. Yeah, yeah. Amazing how it sneaks in, huh?
Yeah. There's nothing, there could not be anything that would hold any state as permanent.
That's right.
What would be
That's
a
right.
reality that fixes any
Yes.
insight as final
Yes.
and
Yes.
arriving? That would be an impossible
It
task
is
then.
impossible, yeah. It is impossible, yeah. Change is the characteristic of all of this that shows up. It can possibly be imagined or shows up in form, either, real or imagined, like well, subjectively real. Like it's always subject to change, always. And that's beautiful because it's like, hey, this wave just keeps on going, like surf it, you know, like just ride it. It's such a fun journey. It's such a journey. It's just wonderful. And I mean, I've been in hell, and I've been on my knees bawling, crying, and I've done years of therapy, and I've done ayahuasca, and I've done rebirthing, and I've done, good Lord, the list would be just ridiculous if I were to kind of revisit all the things that I've done along the way in order to um, try to see another little piece of um, what's still not okay, what's still not okay, and you know, keep going, enjoy it all, enjoy every experience, let it be here, and it moves along, and the next one comes, and enjoy that too. So it's kind of like it's like an attitude of saying yes is very useful. It's very useful, um, and every phase has its own meaning, you know um, yeah, yeah, let it happen, say yes to it.
Yeah. So if someone has the idea that somehow they get onto this spiritual path and then someday they will be finished with it, that's an
Yeah,
illusion they have to let go of.
yeah, so sooner or later that will be seen to be false, and
Yeah.
that's it's useful if it keeps you motivated, and if it's like, yeah, I need to believe that because it'll keep me going. It's like, okay, now you know what it's for.
Yeah.
Okay, but if it doesn't have that purpose, yeah, drop it,
Yeah. Yeah. One
and
can actually,
work on it, enjoying the ride.
right. Yeah, one can actively use that knowledge and say, I am a human being, I'm goal oriented. So I set for myself a goal in order to just get myself
Yes,
going and motivated
yes,
because I'm in that state of mind right now that I need it. But you don't have
yes,
to make it like a new unconscious belief that you hold.
that's right.
And so, yeah, that's
That's
It
right.
will be a journey, whether you will call it spiritual in the future or you drop the term completely. It is never going to be any fixed state forever.
That's right.
Yeah, that's so
That's right.
beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think also we kind of reached the end of the questions I wanted to ask you. No, I have one final question for you.
Uh-huh.
That actually, I saw one of your talks maybe 4 years ago at the SAND conference, and there you mentioned something that got me very curious, and that is you said you had experiences, even though the term doesn't really fit, of something beyond consciousness, where you say there is something that we cannot even fathom to describe as
Mm-hmm.
anything, but
Mm-hmm.
there is something outside of consciousness. And
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's something where I didn't go yet. So really, I cannot really grasp what you mean, because everything ever experienced here, I would say the final thing beyond all of it is consciousness. So what is that there that you experience?
Yeah. Yeah. The non-dual path will take you to consciousness as the end game. Stay there. It didn't close out like that for me. It didn't. It it was seen to be a concept too. It was seen to be okay. So identification with pure consciousness, what I am is pure awareness. It broke. It was seen through. I wasn't questioning it. It popped on its own, like, oh holy shit! Like it was one of those kind of like, oh my god, there's this real subtle identification with pure consciousness. Oh my gosh, it's 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 a hook. It's part of a building block of a lens of perception of pure consciousness. Oh, and I had known for a long time that existence itself was a myth, but I couldn't place it anywhere. It's like I know existence is a story, that existence actually isn't real, you know. And then that showed up within a couple of minutes. It's like, oh, the existence, pure consciousness, when it kind of turns around and sees itself, the idea of existence shows up. Ah, okay. So it's aware of awareness, no? Pure consciousness is conscious of itself. So the, it's important for non-dual people to know about being aware of awareness and then awareness that's not aware of itself. Those two lenses of perception need to be recognized. Yeah, then identification with capital S self, identification as pure consciousness, pure awareness, that goes. So it's not about something new showing up, it's about the building blocks of pure consciousness break. And prior to consciousness shows up. But I don't mean prior in terms of time, because consciousness exists outside of the timeline, outside of the concept of space. So prior to consciousness shows up. So it's only findable through the breaking up of the felt experience of consciousness, of pure consciousness, existence, and the identification with pure consciousness. That pure consciousness is at all.
Hmm.
When these break up,
Hmm. I, I have a hard time, I have to say, imagining that. Because
great, because
when
you can't imagine it.
yeah,
The mind is like WTF, like, huh? Yeah.
I mean, I can certainly see how everything that ever is experienced in any situation, whether that's a spiritual insight or whatever, is when turned into words and you say that's consciousness, I see how that's only a concept again, because there is not nothing. anything separate that's really consciousness. The consciousness is what expresses itself. So in that sense, I can see how consciousness doesn't exist, but how would you even experience anything that's not somehow aware? That's the part I cannot really fathom.
Yeah. So it's a spiritual opening. That question is very valid. So
Yeah.
the mind can't figure it out because it has to work with concepts.
Hmm.
And I'm talking about prior to all of that, even the subtle concept of pure consciousness, which we say is not a concept, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not in the regular sense of a concept because it's that which cannot be named, but we use the name just for ease of communication. But
Yeah.
really, it's nameless, formless. However,
Mhm.
let that fall apart too.
But then you say also, once you make sense of it, once you want to try to explain it, you are back in the story of your personality and you try to make sense from that point of view, and that's not possible.
No, it's not possible. It's fun to try, but it's not possible. No,
Hmm.
no. It's a falling away of the layer of what I am as pure consciousness, what I
Hmm.
am as pure awareness. That breaks down.
Hmm. But then, is there any, you could say, content of that opening or experience, if you call it that, if you can call it that?
There's a mind question now, trying to use the language of the world to make sense of that which is absolutely not, um,
Okay.
not. I can't even say what it's not, but
Yeah.
it's like the question doesn't match. It's like the question is happening in a vacuum, and this is outside of all of it. It's like here's the question circling, and outside of all of it is like they're not seeing each other. They're not seeing each
Okay.
other. They cannot see each other. They cannot.
Hmm. But at the same
So
time, you would say that doesn't like violate the idea that all of reality is one.
in that lens of perception, all of reality is one. Yes, there is a unified lens of perception where all of
And it,
reality is one, and
okay,
there is a
but it
prior to
also
that.
and this oneness you say includes the perspective that is unconscious or outside consciousness
Prior to conscious, prior
prior.
to pure consciousness, is it? Because the unconscious is mind stuff that's going into the matrix.
Hmm.
The one, no, none of that has anything to do with prior to consciousness. Nothing that we talk about, nothing has any significance at all. Because everything, every lens of perception that we've spoken about and danced in and out of different viewpoints, that's the play of consciousness. That's the play of consciousness. Then we have the baseline of pure consciousness. There is a spiritual happening where the baseline of pure consciousness breaks up. That's all I can say. Because there's nothing there. The questions are invalid. Like they're just invalid. It's like not appropriate. It's like it's kind of like plants don't grow on Mars. Well, why? Because there's no oxygen there. But plants grow here. It's like, yeah, but there's no oxygen there, so they can't grow there. But what if we, maybe we could project? Plants don't grow there because there's no oxygen there. It's like it's a entirely different. My brain wants to say environment, but that's not going to be useful. It's removing the layer of pure consciousness.
Hmm. So
Don't
they're
grasp it
actually
because grasping will never ever let you. That grasping will make you move further away from it. Sorry,
okay.
Larry,
Yeah.
I interrupted.
No, yeah. I mean, then that sounds like, okay, there's really nothing that could ever in this. kind of perceptive lens of
Mm.
consciousness could ever go there. So from this point
Mm.
of view, not, it's really nothing. Nothing
Yes, thank
exists
you.
there.
That's right.
Um,
It's nothing from here. Absolutely nothing.
okay.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
infinite one consciousness includes the nothingness that lies outside of itself.
No, no, it doesn't. There is no infinite one consciousness. Prior to consciousness, no, there is no including anything. The inclusive part
Yeah.
starts with pure consciousness. And everything is built upon pure consciousness because all of this happens within consciousness, no?
Yeah.
All of that we're speaking about. But there is no meeting point. It's the absence of pure consciousness that I'm
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah, that's
It's
kind of
not
what I
included.
tried to catch in predicting myself in one sentence by saying it includes that which it lies outside of itself. So
Uh-uh, uh-uh.
doesn't make
No,
sense,
that's
right?
trying to bring, yeah, it's trying to bring the laws of pure consciousness of the unified field to prior to itself. But no, there is no connection point, none.
Okay.
It's the
Hmm.
absence. It's
Hmm.
the absence of pure consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah,
Let it
I
go.
mean, I think
Let
it's
it go. Yeah, and keep clearing the limitations. And if
yeah.
the limitation of the very subtle baseline pure consciousness, if that breaks up, it breaks up. If it doesn't, don't worry about it. But you can't
Hmm.
make that happen. I mean, like it's either going to show up on its own or not. That one, you can't do anything for that except keep on trucking,
Hmm.
keep on removing limitations. And if that limitation goes, great. If it doesn't, so what?
Yeah, yeah.
Let it be loose,
Hmm.
authentically loose. The
Is there,
grasping is the problem.
yeah, too many other insights? There are like kind of also practical aspects, but I guess this lies really outside of what
Yeah.
you can transform into any plausible way of integrating it into like the human life. So I think that's a, after all of what you said, which was also very practical, I think it's a good note to end on, like that there's also something that transcends all of it, and let it
Well,
leave as that.
pure consciousness transcends all the other layers of perception that are pure consciousness playing in manifestation.
Hmm.
There is no relationship between prior to consciousness and consciousness. It's not a transcendence of the others. There is no relationship.
Hmm. Hmm.
None. But the mind will keep trying, as we can see. So it's happening
Yeah.
here now. The mind keeps trying and it's like you got to let it go. You got to let it go.
Hmm.
But it's
Okay.
really interesting that this exchange is going on because it might help others too to let it go.
Yeah.
Keep working on the normal, mundane limitations of your life, of your
Yeah, that's
thinking.
probably all we can do anyways, right?
That's
Can't
really
go
where the
there.
rubber hits the road. Yeah, it's how
Yeah.
you show up in every day. Yeah, are you like, is every moment fresh and you're present, or like, and you meet somebody and it's the first time you meet them, or are you like, I am so being influenced by what happened with you yesterday, and that's what's going on for me now. It's like, stop dragging the past, like, be in the moment, be present. That's a hell of a spiritual tool. A lot more difficult than what it sounds. If you really start, oh my God, look at all the nuances of how I can't even be present, you know, to start becoming more and more and more aware of the subtleties of what's at play so that we genuinely are present, you know. That's beautiful.
Yeah. That's the majority of the work. That's so
It
great. And
is really, isn't it?
I think we have given listeners here a lot of input, a lot of things to work with, and even more to contemplate, more work to contemplate. And that's also what I find many people miss nowadays in this digital age where it's so easy to jump from one content to the
Yes.
next, to
Yes.
really give your mind the time to let all of this integrate and reflect on what we just talked about, and just really get all the juice out of any one book you read or any one talk you hear. And so I just wanted to leave people also with this after so much interesting input. And maybe before we end, how can people find you? Um, just leave them with some of your content.
Sure. There's a lot of material on YouTube, as you referred to a few times. There are, I don't know, 500 or 600 maybe, satsang gatherings on a free podcast called The Mind Stops Here. So, I mean, that's a lot of listening. Years and years of satsang gatherings. Then on my website, there's a spiritual community where there's either a teaching or a meditation with a teaching, or a Q&A session on Sundays. And that event is ongoing. And then there's one-to-one sessions and physical retreats, and it's all with jac-o'keeffe.com. That's where you'll find it. Quotes go up on Facebook a couple of times a week. I'm not really active on any other platform at the moment. Insight Timer. Insight Timer is an interesting little app where I do really kind of practical tools. It talks on practical steps,
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I will
They're the
leave
pieces.
the links in the description of this interview down below.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was so great to have you here on the channel,
Yeah.
Jac. Thank you for
Yeah, it was a
coming
fun
on.
conversation. We maneuvered all, so many
Yes,
different layers. So I think
yes,
there's something for everyone in this
yes.
talk. So thank you, Lauritz. Thank
I
you.
agree as well. Thank you a lot. And with that, thank you everyone for listening and goodbye.